because the premise of Only Tens is we only do things we want to do, and we don't do things we don't want to do, only always.
Welcome to the Measure Success podcast, where we feature top leaders on how they measure success in their business and life. Now, let's learn from their experiences.
Carl J. Cox here, host of the Measure Success podcast, where I talk with top leaders about effective strategies that inspire success. This episode is brought to you by 40 Strategy. 40 Strategy is built to make strategy work for small to medium-sized businesses and organizations by helping them design their strategic plan, but more importantly, actually keeping them accountable to get it done. To learn more, go to 40strategy.com. We're excited about our book, Lost at CEO, which has been released. It has become a bestseller, and you could find it in Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, audible.com. Go out, order it. We even have a limited time version and 99-cent version on the ebook, so feel free to go out and grab that today. Really excited for our guest, Mark Silverman. Mark is an executive coach, speaker, podcaster, author, and at just 27 years old, folks, listen to this, he found himself homeless and living out of his truck. But with resilience and determination, he rose above his circumstances and to become a millionaire just 6 years later. Mark, welcome to the Measure Success podcast.
Thank you. I love being here.
So, Mark, we had a fun prep call on this, and we've had kind of two prep calls.
We're like 20, 30 minutes late because we were just chatting.
Exactly. But it was good. I mean, and we had a really good even prep conversation before this. We just found out we each respectively have had burst appendix, have had an NG tube down our throat. Mark, how in your scale of best and worst, that was like one of your worst experiences, right? You ever had in your life?
That was, yeah, I will say that tube going down my throat and then living with it for a couple of days was the worst experience, one of the worst experiences of my life.
Isn't like one of the hardest things in the world? Like that, it feels like there's like a rod, a pole, like in your throat, restricting it. And to those who have to have this continuously, my heart goes out to all of you. That is like one of the worst, most difficult things. And I gotta say this for me, Mark, it gave me a little bit, and I'll say a little bit because I wish I had more empathy, a little bit of empathy, right, for people who have to go through these things. But you had something else that was even super intense as well. I mean, we just said in the headline here, you were homeless, right? You know, and you were living out of your truck. How in the heck did you get there?
That was way more fun than the burst appendix and the going down through my nose into my stomach. That was definitely easier because I didn't know any better then. So for me, that was kind of a fish in water, and I was swimming in waters that I understood, which was crisis. What happened was I went to college for about 2 months when I turned 18, and I got a job as a co-check in a bar, just because the co-check had quit, and I made $100 that night. And I said, "Would you want to come back tomorrow?" Next night, I did. I made another $100. 3 weeks later, they made me a bartender, and I never went back to school. So I, at 18, I became a bartender, and it was all the drinks I could, do, all the drugs I could do. It was a blast every single night and plenty of money. So why go back to college? And that ended me, that fun ride ended me living in my truck, 135 pounds, coming to Washington, D.C. and begging for my brother for some money and a place to stay.
Wow. And so it's interesting. So it's super interesting how seductive certain things can be, right? You talk about this, hey, it's just $100. And that back then, right, in that part of your life, $100 was a lot of money, right? And you're a starving student.
1980.
That's a lot of money. I mean, back then. I mean, I remember that's like when wages was like $3.35 an hour, I think, or maybe it's lower than that. I think in that period of time. So, $100 that's a lot of time, and here you are making that. And it's like, well, why go to school? I can make this, but the problem is you got caught in this culture, right, of fun, for lack of a better term, right? And you said it, it's fun until it wasn't fun.
Right. It was really fun until it really wasn't fun, right? It was fast up and fast down. Years and years later, after my divorce, I was going to a psychiatrist who worked with people in the CIA, and he said, "I have a hunch about you." And I'm in my 40s now. I have children and a career and everything, and I'm sober. And he says, "I want to do some tests on you." And he does some tests on me, and some part of my frontal lobe. And he puts these electrodes on me, and he says, "See that? See all that black area right there?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's supposed to light up. That's your executive function. That's your impulse control." I was like, that explains everything, right?
Wow.
And when we had my sons tested for ADD, we tested the whole family so that he wouldn't feel stigmatized. And the doctor looked at me and said, "How do you even function? You're so much further off the charts ADD than your children. Like, how do you even function?" And I was like, okay. So in my 40s, I figured out why everything took so much work.
And this is so interesting, right? Because ADD has been around probably forever, right? And in many cases, a lot of people have extraordinary careers because of it, right? Those who are able to manage it. And then there's those that have issues like you go down. I mean, Grant Cardone has a crazy story, right? You're familiar with him. I mean, kind of not too dissimilar, right? Of where, and so then so when you uncovered this, right? If that makes sense, and you recognize, wow, I had something, I had something that was actually part of my brain that was real, right? This was a physiological thing, not just a quote unquote a mental thing, but is impacting your mental capacity, right? To be able to do things. So what happened then when you found out this was true? How did you change your habits, behaviors? What did you do next?
So I went on Ritalin. And I remember I started taking Ritalin, and I would sit down at my desk and I would get my work done. And it was like, what's because I was a great sales guy. I made tons of money, right? I was really good at relationships. I was really good at anything that excited me, at anything that gave me dopamine, right? Anything that the hunt, the chase, all those things, those were fun. But I would carry $20,000 worth of expenses that I never put in because I could never sit down and put them into the app, right? Like, so I would do things like I would pay our admin in our office 20% of my expenses to put them all in for me. And the way I
Wow.
told my ex-wife how to, like, she was like, "Why are you paying her 20%?" I said, "Because I lose more than 20% of the receipts and everything she pays for herself." Right. So I figured out how to do those kinds of things. So the Ritalin really helped. I remember my boss came into my office once. He goes, "What are these?" I said, "Oh, they're my Ritalin." He takes two, goes back to his office. He comes back into my office like 3 hours later. He goes, "I haven't thought about killing my wife for 3 hours. What is that stuff, and how do I get more?" I'm like, yeah. The problem with
We shouldn't be laughing about that, but that's
they're divorced and he's remarried. But anyway, the crash from that was really hard. Like I would be living in a Disney world all day long, getting things done. I was in a great mood, and then 4, 5 o'clock, hateful, hateful, hateful. So fast forward when I became a coach, I was still taking the Ritalin to get stuff done. Now I'm an entrepreneur. Like I left corporate. Never underestimate the power of an asshole sales manager to get you to do things you don't feel like doing. Right. So I really like to please people, and if I really like my sales team, I would overachieve. When I was sitting in my office as an entrepreneur, as a coach by myself, like there was nobody to tell me to go do something that was much harder or boring or anything like that. So that was really, really hard. And that's when I wrote my book, Only Tens, because I was sitting in my office. Why? I made millions, in my career, and now I'm this entrepreneur and I can't figure things out. And I was talking to my coach about it. I decided to get a PhD in getting things done with ADD, and not and I didn't want to take the medication anymore. And what I did was I decided I was only going to do things that were a hell yes. I was only going to do things that I wanted to do or needed to do. Like they had to be a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. They had to be a 10. They couldn't be a 2 or 3. They couldn't even be a 9, because what I realized was anything that was at like a 9.5 on my list, I kept putting on my list and kept putting it on the next list and next list, and I never got it done. But if it was a 10, I did it. Like if it was like hell yes, or, like, so what I did was I experimented. And all of a sudden I like there'd be only one or two or three tens in a day. There's only a few things that have to get done or I really feel compelled to do. So what would happen is I started getting a few things done. I started getting my intuition started to get really honed. Like I would trust, call this person. I would trust, create this piece of content. I would trust those things. And all of a sudden, like the wheels started turning. And all of a sudden I started getting more and more things done. I said, I'm going to get a PhD in this. I'm going to write a book for myself about being an entrepreneur with ADD. 90 days later, only tens was, and the original title was "Using Distraction to Get the Right Things Done." Was written, and 1,500 copies sold the first day. Now
Wow.
you just published a book, right? I did not know that that was a success. I
That's a
thought
massive. That is massive.
I only found out that selling $75,000, 75,000 copies of a book is a big deal, like recently. So when I published only tens, like it just went like wildfire. People started giving it to CEOs. Other coaches would call me and say, I'm giving this to my clients and stuff like that. They now understand why they don't get things done, because the premise of only tens is we only do things we want to do, and we don't do things we don't want to do, only always. And when I realize that I'm not a victim of circumstance, like let's say like feeding your kids. And people say, I have to feed my kids. I'm like, no, you don't have to feed your kids. You absolutely do not have to feed your kids. Now you want your kids to be alive and healthy and thrive. So you want to feed your kids. But you don't have to feed your kids. You don't actually have to do anything. And when I realized that, everything broke loose for me, and I started to pay attention to, that give a damn. And once I understood that the things that I'm whining about not getting done, I'm not getting done because, and I'm honest about, like, I don't want to do that. Now, there's certain things that have to be done, right? That really, like, I needed to do my expenses or they weren't going to pay me. And it was thousands of dollars, when I was a sales guy, right? Okay, I can hire that out, right? For my book. So for my new book, I've written 5 freaking books with ADD. For my new book, I got a book coach. When it came time to edit the book, so the book's done, and this, you just did this with Lost the CEO, which, by the way, great book. The the publisher sends it back to me and says, "Okay, Mark, go through it one more time." Again, with ADD, go through it one more time, find mistakes. So I had a group of friends who were on a text thread. I'm on page 25. I'm on page 37. I'm on page, like, just that dopamine of having someone there listening to me as I go through it. I used every tool, all the help I could get to get it across the finish line. So if it's a 10, you'll get help. So that's how I dealt with the ADD. Is I started to tell them the truth about what I was willing to do and what I'm not willing to do.
So, Mark, what I see so fascinating about what you said is, my early part of my career was CFO by the age of 30, went up the traditional, finance accounting track. But what you said was so interesting is, I have always found my job as a CFO was so much easier when we had great salespeople. Because when you have great salespeople, when sales are high, your profits are higher. And then as a result of that, you get to pay out bonuses and everybody's happy. But when sales is down, everyone turns to the CFO and they're like, why does the number suck? And I go, well, because we're not selling, half the time. That's not always true. Sometimes you're not managing your expenses. But often, Mark, so many times, that classic hunter like you are in terms of a salesperson, and I bet if we did a hunter farmer analysis, you'd be like 5+ off the chart hunter salesperson. I can't tell you the amount of times about hunters don't do their expense report.
Nope.
It's just the dumbest thing in the world for them to do. Why am I going to do this expense report? I remember I had a person, a publicly traded company, and they said this, and this is crass for those who are listening. Put it on pause and get kids in the car. Okay. Right? But they said this. They said, hey, signing the LOI is like the climax of sex, and collecting the cash is like cleaning up after sex. Okay. Now, the irony of this part is one guy actually had to help us collect cash because we had to collect it to help make sure we were still a going concern as a company, as a publicly traded company. Side story. But the point is this, is that the excitement for many is the signature, right? It's getting it done. That's the excitement. They don't care about the details. But what we miss, Mark, what you said, and I'm a Gallup Strengths certified coach, this is what it's about. When you can compartmentalize your strengths and know what your strengths are, just look in your book, tens. And we're all doing, when everybody's doing our tens at work, you have a company that is humming along and things get done. When you try to say you have to do well, in your case, anything less than a 10, you can't do. But even if it's an 8.9, last night I had to order contacts at Walgreens and it was like building a dam for me. I mean, it was the most difficult thing in the world. I have to really go online and put in these numbers. And literally, I like almost had, I fell asleep in the middle of the NCAA tournament basketball game because I was so exhausted afterwards. So I love it that you've helped people and they get excited about it because they see this reality.
Well, for entrepreneurs, it's really interesting. I work mostly in corporate. Most of my clients are in the C-suite in corporate companies. But my entrepreneur clients, the ones who are young and are after it, I don't have to follow up on them to make sure they're getting shit done. Right? I don't have to. I don't. They're usually knocking stuff off their list. They're usually burning the candles at both ends. And what I'm trying to do is kind of slow them down so that they're getting traction in what they're doing. My
Yes.
my older entrepreneurs are always the ones who are complaining to me that they're the bottleneck in their business. They're not getting this done. They're not, they said said they would take this on in their company. They do this on their company. They're not getting these things done. And my answer to them is it's one, you've already done it. Like you've already built 3 companies. This is boring, right? The other piece is you're already rich. I yelled at one guy. I said, your problem is you're too rich, you're too fat, and your girlfriend's too pretty. Like you just don't have any reason to get anything done. And that woke him up,
Wow.
right? He wound up losing a bunch of, we had a whole conversation. He wound up really kind of turning that around. But the problem is you don't get the dopamine, that reward for doing those things because you already have enough money. You're not doing it for the money. So you have to, for those people in those situations, we have to take them and hire a president. They hire a CEO, hire someone to do all the things in the business that they don't want to do, and then put them in their zone of genius and in their zone of genius only. Because otherwise they're just going to complain because they're not old enough to retire. They're not, they're still full of ideas. They just don't want to implement any of their ideas. They want to see them come to fruition. So that only tens thing shows up everywhere. We only do what we want to do and we don't do what we don't want to do.
Mark, I love it how you talked about that concept of the very successful entrepreneur goes into something else and struggles, right, with that next gig. And I see that often. And there's doing something one time is something, doing it twice is very impressive, but doing it 3 times is really rare. Right. And then you find it's like all of a sudden, if people could do it 3 times, they've done it 7 times, right? Because they've figured out the pattern. But part of that pattern is once again figuring out that they can't do everything. They've learned to delegate. They've learned to compartmentalize. They've learned to do different things. They've learned to find the things that win, that gets them excited each day. I remember, Mark, this is so interesting. And this is better than I do. The amount of people we talk on the show, and it's not about money anymore, right? Because many people who are our guests in here are very successful people. It's not about the money anymore. It's about making impact, making a difference, doing things. I remember the one guy, once again, doesn't have to have anything left. Like he needs no more money. Like, okay, this guy probably has multiple lifetime type money stuff. And he said, Carl, if I need to get back in, I was with a private equity firm, and he's trying to become the operator of this one particular company. He's like, Carl, if I see one more luxury swimming pool, I'm going to drown myself in it. Like he wanted to be in the hunt again, right? He was missing the hunt. And the difference here is being more selective. I'm curious, when you're coaching these successful people and they have that event, that sell event, how do you help them to get to see the next side when and you face this in your own life, but how do you help them get to see the next side, that just because you have a bunch of zeros in your bank account, it doesn't matter? How do you help them figure out there is a next summit, there's a next journey, there's a next somewhere else that they need to go to, and it's important to figure it out now rather than later?
Sure. It starts way before. Right? You can't just because again, what happens if it's sudden is depression. It's people. I just published my fifth book 2 weeks ago, and people are like, "How you doing, Mark?" And I said, "Well, I kind of feel like I caught the car. I'm the dog who caught the car." Okay, yeah, and I don't mean to minimize the book. I love my book, but I'm a dopamine chaser, right? So the book's done. The book's out. It hit number one in 5 categories. Yay, that's so awesome. Chop wood, carry water. Right? Like that's what's next. So for these people, it's really creating what is the legacy that's next. A lot of them are moving towards legacy kind of stuff. They have foundations, and they really want to put their time into that. A lot of people want to give back, go into like private equity or venture capital of some sort. And a lot of them are really really good at the mentoring and venture capital stuff. As far as building another business, it doesn't. I haven't. I hate to say it. I haven't seen it work. Um, I haven't seen it, and I very limited. I'm not a huge entrepreneurial coach, so I like that was big in early in my career. I've really kind of made a name for myself in big corp, but the ones that have, it's kind of if the shine ain't there, I'm not that interested. So and like again back, I'll make it really personal. My coach of last year, we were working, everything that I'm doing, everything that I have to teach. I have a multi-million-dollar coaching business in me if I want to create it. Only tens could have been a whole thing. The Rising Leader, totally a whole thing. And my last coach, we were working on, bringing my company to mid seven figures. And he's go getter, go, he's 30 years old, good looking, and just go getter. And he's like, Silverman, we got this. And then finally said, you know what? No. I said, I, I felt like I should do that, but I have zero interest. And I'm noticed I'm not going to do the things I need to do to build the business that we're talking about. Right. And what I know, my friend, Dr. Jeff Spencer, who is like coach to U2 and Sir Richard Branson, and he's amazing. He's taught me the phrase, I follow callings. I don't chase goals. So I follow callings. So we were talking about turning 60. When I turned 60 is when this calling to write the Rising Leader Handbook came, and to pivot my whole business in this direction. So when I follow the calling, I wind up doing everything I need to do to get something done. When I chase a goal, I wind up falling short just because I'm not hungry, right? I don't have anything to prove anymore. And a lot of these people that we're talking about don't have anything to prove anymore. Right. So if don't have any of that stuff, where are you going to get the fuel to do that? The other piece is, I hate to say it, but if we're talking about us men start to lose testosterone in our 50s, and that has nothing to do with sexual prowess. It has everything to do with focus and drive. And when our testosterone starts to wane, again, I'm going to reiterate, has nothing to do with our sex life. When it starts to wane, our give a damn gets busted. So if we want to tangle with the 35 and 40-year-olds, one, we need a nap, and two, we need to get our hormones in shape, right? And we need to be eating right and doing all those things. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, I can't at 60 do what I'm doing if I didn't take complete and 100% care of myself. The whole thing falls apart, right? So when you're an older entrepreneur and you want to go into that next venture, there's a lot of factors that go into that.
Yeah, you hit on some. I mean, once again, what I love about what you've been talking about is there's real, once again, physiological things, right, that emancipate out into what actually happens, right? And you said once again that testosterone piece, that's a legit. We don't want to talk about it, right? Because worried about the blue pill or something like that. It's like no. Like this is once again comes down to your drive, your actual care to drive, and you will. Well, I won't mention who it is, but one person I know really closely, and he got involved in a private equity type situation, and he was right near his 50s, and it had turned into a miserable experience. This particular situation, he just said he just sometimes called it his CTC. I said, well, what is that? He said, just cut the check. Like he gotten to the point where he didn't care anymore. It didn't matter anymore. He was just doing it for the paycheck, and that is like for me is like the worst thing in the world, right? Because yes, we all need a pair of bills. Don't get me wrong. We got to make sure we have a retirement. I get that, right? Get those basic functions, so to speak. But you want to live with more purpose, right? We want to have more into it, because otherwise there is only a finite period. Like you said, how are we really making a huge difference? So you're thinking about that piece of what I just said there, when you recognize people have lost their mojo for a number of reasons, right? It could be relationships, it could be different pieces. How do you help get your clients back so they're finding it again?
I've taken so many people through the blank page. The thing that they're afraid of is the blank is that no man's land between who I was and who I want to be. Because there's very, very rarely is there, I'm this person and oh great, I'm gonna go be this person now. There's usually a gap in between that nobody wants to sit in. Nobody wants to sit in the, I don't know what's next. I don't really know who I am. I thought I was this person all the way up to this time. Maybe my marriage doesn't fit. Maybe the business doesn't fit. I'm not who I want to be. And very few people are willing to look at, because they're afraid, I don't want to get divorced. And like looking at your marriage and finding out that the way your marriage is doesn't mean you need to get divorced. It means now you get to create something new with your spouse, right? It could mean that, or it could mean divorce. I don't know, but people are afraid to look. If I can get them into that no man's land, and no matter how much they get prepared for no man's land, and especially same thing with me, you go into no man's land, it's named that for a reason. It's terrifying. Who I was is gone. Who I'm going to be isn't there yet. Who am I? And almost nobody can handle that. So they take a job, they start a business, they get a new girlfriend, they buy a condo to rent it. Like they do something. But eventually, if you can messily go through it, then you start to figure out who you are, what you want to be, right? One of my clients said, what I really want to be is an artist in Italy. But he's like, that's silly, because he's, a CEO and an engineer. And I'm like, that's not silly. You were an artist when you were younger, right? But now let's just tease that out. Let's start seeing what that means to you. It doesn't mean you're going to go live in Venice or something like that, but maybe you will. And then start slowly coming out. And then we came up with a completely different direction for his life. And he actually uprooted and moved to Venice. But he uh, absolutely created a next chapter, not what he expected. I think, that midlife crisis, my first podcast was called Mastering Midlife. And that was, for me, terrifying. If I'm not this person and I can't be that person anymore, but I don't know who I am, how do I figure that out was really hard.
I love this conversation. I want to go to no man's land just for a visual for just a minute, where a lot of that came from, and perhaps this isn't the most, but where I most recognize the name is from World War One, right? Where there was these basically dug in portions where they'd run across these areas with machine guns on each side of World War One and just get nailed down. Like I think the average lifespan of a machine gun is for like 30 seconds in times of war in World War One. That is absolutely terrifying, right? So when we make this comment, that's what we're saying. You are gonna die, right? You're gonna die when you go across this. Your old self
And
is
it's
gonna
gonna
die,
feel like that. Like it isn't gonna feel sort of like that. It's gonna feel like that. And that's what most people are not prepared for.
right? And this is literally through this conversation. There's been times I've been with CEOs, and they should sell now. Like everything about the business is built for perfection to sell right now, but they're not ready yet because their identity is I'm a CEO. And I've seen multiple CEOs literally put away millions of dollars, like not get it because they timed it wrong. It was their being, it was their occupation, it was what they loved. And by the way, not all business should be sold either if you're only getting 2 times your salary, right? You know what I mean? Like, do you really want to sell for 2 times? Yeah, I just want to get rid of it. Okay, I get that. But sometimes when you can get 10 or 20x or 100x or 1000x, right? Versus what you're at, because the value you've created in a business, but then all of a sudden you don't get it because you waited too long or you did this. But it comes down to your identity. Once again, we're not willing to challenge who we are to where we should be and not recognizing the pieces around it. So I just want to say thank you for bringing that concept here to our listeners. And hope some people who are listening here are going to go, oh, am I willing to walk across, a dead man?
And I mean to bring it up with compassion. It's
Yes.
not like you need to be David Goggins and eat nails and go do this. Like, be kind to yourself. This is a life passage. I got a call from a CTO that I used to work with this huge company, powerful CTO. He wielded the pen for millions of dollars worth of stuff all the time. He left to become a consultant, and people have watched me leave tech and watch what I've done. I'm still shocked at how many people know exactly who I am and what I'm doing. But he asked if he could have a call with me. I'm like, of course. He's like up here and I'm still this, sales guy. But, the respect that he came at me with, and he said, Mark, one thing I didn't understand when I became a consultant was my phone isn't going to ring. My phone doesn't ring. It's like, I thought I had all these friends and all these people were all interested in me because my phone never stopped ringing and I had to fight everybody off with a stick. He said, now crickets. Welcome to entrepreneurship where you make your own way.
Oh, I love that. And it's so cool because, once again, you've obviously dealt with more than one person that has jumped off the corporate cliff, right, to go out on their own. And the hardest thing is to recognize that people are looking for something to solve their problem, not necessarily you, right? Meaning they might draw and understand and respect who you are. And so they might hire you based on past experience. But at the end of the day, they're looking for something new for you to deliver, right? And especially once you get outside your referral network, which may only be so big, you could actually sell, right? You're actually going to have to move forward and sell. And for the vast majority of entrepreneurs, they're not salespeople. Like, I don't actually have many clients that are CEO salespeople because they're selling for themselves. So it's it's a pretty small group for the most part because they're natural born salespeople, right? They know how to. But when the people are there, the CTOs, the engineers, the accountants, you name it, the lawyers, when they're outside of their core thing and they're not doing their core trade, right? It is a whole different world to get people confidence. All right, Mark, how do you measure success? We're going to do couple quick questions. How do you measure success in your business today and coaching clients?
Oh, we now got meta where we mentioned the name of the podcast in the podcast.
Of course.
How do I measure success? So then I'm going to tell on myself. I get hired for promotions. I get hired for people to make more money. I get hired for those kinds of things, and I really don't care. So I'm working with 2 young men who are in private equity, actually. The rocket ship that they were on, the CEO asked me if I would coach them and help them mature into their roles and all that. And I remember going up and talking to them, and this was going to be a big win for me. And they both said they wanted to work with me. I flew to where they were, and they both said they wanted to work with me. And I said, hold up, before we agree to work together, I want to know, are you going to be the kind of men? Are you interested in being the kind of men your wives need you to be? They're like, yeah. I said, are you interested? And inside, I'm going, Silverman, shut the fuck up. Shut up. This is $50,000 sitting right here. You need this money. Shut up. And I said, are you going to be the kind of fathers your children need you to be? They're like, yes. I said, are you going to be the kind of men who are responsible with this kind of wealth? And they said, absolutely, we're in. And again, I'm like, what are you doing, Mark? but that's what I care about, right? Because they were going to be so wildly wealthy, and so fast forward, they exceeded every metric they could possibly have ever thought, right? And I've been with them for years now. One got married, had kid, another one had 3 kids, and they took me out to dinner with their wives a couple of years ago. They took me out to dinner, and we're in this restaurant. And first time I met the wives, and they look at me. The wives look at me and they say, we know what you've done for our husbands as far as their leadership skills and what they're accomplishing at work. So we just want you to know what you've done for them as men and for husbands for us.
Wow.
I'm like ugly crying in this fancy restaurant. Like that's success to me, right? So the premise of my new book, The Rising Leader Handbook, is about thriving. It's like, you can have a spiritual experience in the corporate office, or you can have it on the Serengeti. It doesn't really matter, right? So if you can learn to have difficult conversations, if you can learn to ask for what you want, if you can learn to speak your mind without fear of consequence, right? If you can learn to do those things, you are on the knife edge of life, right? If you can have that conversation, because most of my like, I need to leave my wife. I'm leaving my wife, or I'm leaving the company. So they go back and forth between being a doormat or walking out the door. And I'm like, have we tried the third option? Like, what third option? Like, how about having a conversation about what you're unhappy about? How about asking for a raise? How about asking for these responsibilities? Can you do what? Right? So you're either a doormat or you're walking out the door. And if you really want to show up, let's have these sweaty palm conversations. So for me, success is when people stop feeling trapped by by all these things on the outside. They find out who they are on the inside, and they're able to speak their mind. They're able to actually express themselves. What comes with that is wild financial and career and relationship success, right? It's that prison, because I know billionaires who are miserable and in that prison, right? And I know people who have gone bankrupt who are free. So it's nothing to do with the outside. It's everything to do with the inside.
And what's magical is when you can combine being as successful you can be, both from the outside world, but more importantly from the inside world.
100%. And that's the inside world is all that really actually matters. It just so happens when you get the inside world all set, the outside world starts falling into place.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you talk about in that part in the inside world, because I've been to too many funerals where they don't talk about any of the success of their business. Nobody cares at that point, except for the people who are inheriting your money. Right. Okay. But when it comes to what they really care about is the impact you made in the people that you're around. Right. Did you make a difference? That's why they show up. Right. They show up because of that. And that's what's amazing, right? Is when we can really touch the lives of people. And Mark, I'm glad you had that. I had just literally yesterday, I was with a client, and they were so grateful. They had tears in their eyes. Right. And that there's nothing greater.
What a job, huh?
Yeah, it's just it was so awesome, right? When you can make such a difference, where people have gone to that point of thank you for making a difference. And Mark, I thank you for doing what you do, because that is the most important stuff. What you just said right there, that is true success, right? When we could turn that corner, we could cross dead men, cross that area where we don't want to cross, but get to the other side and become a new man or woman, right? That not only is set up in the outside, but is also set up with their inside. And that's when there's true joy. Mark, I'd like to ask a couple quick questions here. First of all, not one of your own books, one of your own 5 books, but what is a book that inspired you that really started changing your course of life?
Oh my God, how many books have I read? My favorite book these days is called Living Untethered by Michael Singer. It's not The Untethered Soul, which everybody's read. It's Living Untethered, his newest book. For me, again, it's an inside game. I've worked with the most successful people on the planet, and none of it means anything if you don't get the inside in order. And I think that is the best book I've seen on that.
Awesome. Mark, how can people connect and learn more about you?
So everything is at markjsilverman.com, Mark, the letter J, Silverman.com. You can get a free copy of Only Tens that we talked about there. You can learn about my new book there, all kinds of everything I've talked about, almost everything my clients won't read. So there's free videos and all kinds of stuff for everything that I do all there. It's the Rising Leader podcast also is where you can find me.
Mark, you killed it today in a good way. You did a great job. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you being on the Measure Success podcast.
This was so fun. I'm so glad we connected both before and during the podcast.
Absolutely. To it, everyone else is listening. Once again, Mark has bring a ton of knowledge. I hope you will take this, go out and rate our show. That's how we continue to get great guests like Mark to be on it. Go out, take a look at his information, buy his new book, Rising Leader. And we always like to say to you as you're listening, wishing you the very best and measuring your success. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Measure Success podcast. We'll see you again next time to learn from the best. Remember to subscribe now to get future episodes.